Welcome to the Conscience of Kansas radio show with Paul A. Ibbotson, a no-nonsense conservative talk show that looks at the local, state, and national issues that affect the people of Kansas. And now, here's Paul A. Ibbotson.
Lieutenant Colonel Buzz Patterson is the author of 2 New York Times best-selling books with Dereliction of Duty, the eyewitness account of how Bill Clinton compromised America's national security, and Reckless Disregard, how liberal Democrats undercut our military, endanger our soldiers, and jeopardize our security. This was a release in 2004. His newest book is entitled War Crimes, the Left's Campaign to Destroy the Military and Lose the War on Terror. Patterson served for 20 years as an active duty in the military with distinction and saw tours of duty as an Air Force pilot during combat operations in Grenada, Somalia, Rwanda, Haiti, and Bosnia. From 1996 to 1988, Colonel Patterson was the military aide to President Clinton. During this time, he was responsible for the nuclear football, the black bag with the nation's nuclear capability that accompanies the president at all times. What a wonderful career and what a wonderful work he is doing now, ladies and gentlemen. And Lieutenant Colonel Buzz Patterson, we'd like to welcome you to the Conscience of Kansas radio program.
Hello, Paul. My pleasure. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing very well. You know, it's our pleasure to have you on the show. You've done so many different things, both in your military career and in your writing career. And I might start with some of your military service. I think everybody that hears the bio about your work as a senior military aide to President Clinton would, and the carrying of this nuclear football, would have to ask for a little bit more elaboration.
Yeah, sure, Paul. You know, I was an Air Force pilot for 20 years. I retired from the Air Force in 2001. But in the fall of 1995, I was flying for the Air Force in Northern California, received a phone call from the White House asking me to come out to Washington, D.C. to interview to be the president's military aide. And I had no idea at the time what that entailed. And I flew out to Washington, D.C., interviewed for a couple of days, extensive background checks, and was asked to be the President Bill Clinton's military aide and carry the nuclear football. And what, for your listeners, what that means primarily is I was the senior military officer charged with carrying the black satchel, the emergency satchel that accompanies the president at all times, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I had a White House bedroom, a White House office. I traveled with the president on Air Force One, Marine One, all around the world. The military is required to be by the president's side, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, without fail. And I was that guy from 1996 to 1998. And the job goes back. Well, it goes back to President George Washington, actually, but the military aide position with the nuclear football goes back to President John F. Kennedy when he needed to have the nuclear arsenal at his side during the Cuban Missile Crisis. He actually created the position of the nuclear football in the bag nuclear football, and ever since President John F. Kennedy has been a military aide by the president's side in this country with the means to help the president either launch nuclear weapons or retaliate with nuclear weapons. It's a 24-hour day, 7-day job requirement, and I think I was that guy for 2 years, and as such had an up-close, very, very personal, intimate view of what happens in the presidency, and
right.
And I was that guy for President Bill Clinton back in the 1990s.
Well, you know, to most of us, that seems just like James Bond sort of Mission Impossible work, and in some ways I think it is, but you're right. They give you a close, personal point of observation on the president that you would later talk about after your military service in writing these 3 impacting books. And if we could just like to talk a little bit about them. Your first book was Dereliction of Duty. And in my opinion, this book was sort of a somber recollection and statement of some of the aspects of the Clinton presidency. Could you tell our listeners a little bit about that book?
Certainly, you bet, Paul. Actually, I didn't write Dereliction of Duty until I retired from the Air Force in 2001. Mm-hmm. Obviously, as a career military officer, I left the White House in 1998. I actually went out to the Air Force Academy as a commander out there for for 3 years and didn't write the book till I retired from the Air Force in 2001. And I wrote it not so much, Paul, as an indictment or criticism of the president personally.
Right.
I got along with President Clinton very well on a personal basis. It was more of a rehashing of what happened in the 1990s to our country, to our nation, militarily, and also, more importantly, I think, in terms of national defense. And when I left the White House in 1998 and I saw what happened on 9/11, I realized that what had happened during my time at the White House and during President Clinton's time at the White House is we had set ourselves up for failure in the war on terror. So my book, Dereliction of Duty, is really an eyewitness account of what the many ways that we as a nation failed, and President Clinton in particular failed as our commander-in-chief in the 1990s. And again, it's not a personal attack. It's more of a professional look back at the many ways we missed the boat. We missed the signals and what happened to us leading up to 9/11.
Absolutely. And I think it's very important for listeners to understand is that what I get from your books is that you're trying to impart information to help our country. Anyone can take a snipe at the president or any president, but you've touched on some very important deficiencies in President Clinton's abilities to be a commander-in-chief. And one thing I noticed in Dereliction of Duty that just makes my jaw drop, is you include an instance of where the president lost the nuclear codes. Tell us a little bit about that.
Right. Yeah, that was one of many things that really actually raised my radar, sensitivity in terms of President Clinton or in his lack thereof of being able to prosecute national defense. The president, every president since John F. Kennedy, Paul, has carried a credit card-sized document in his pocket or his suit pocket or his pants pocket, which is in fact the nuclear codes. And the military aid also has, military aid has the nuclear football, which is the means by which you actually prosecute all those things. But the president himself has to be able to articulate and identify himself to the Pentagon as being the commander-in-chief. And never before in our nation's history have those codes been lost. And during President Clinton's time, and my time there actually, during the Monica Lewinsky situation in 1998, President Clinton lost those codes. And I talk about this in Dereliction of Duty, not so much because he's not, he's human, he's not infallible. But what negatively impacted me was, Paul, that number one, he did not want to confess to the fact that he had lost the codes, so he was actually trying to blow the whole situation off.
Oh,
but
man.
More importantly, he was more concerned. I think this goes to the heart of who he is as a human being and as a politician. He was more concerned about the fact that that story not get to the press than he was about the fact that he, as the commander-in-chief, he had lost the world's most important military document. And when I asked him and I pressed him about how long he had been missing these codes, because he carries those on his purse in his pants pocket. He could not recall if it had been days, weeks, months. And I was floored by the fact that here is the most important man in the world, in the most important job in the world, with the most important responsibility in the world. He cannot recall when he or how he lost nuclear codes. And I talk about that in Dereliction. And I think really that is the ultimate dereliction of duty. The fact that the guy who's our commander-in-chief lost the most important document in the history of mankind, possibly, and he did not want to recall that. He was more concerned about the fact that it did not get to the press.
Oh man, I tell you what, that's unbelievable. That would happen. I think I would be frantically checking the dryer, or something for those things.
We looked everywhere. As a matter of fact, we turned the White House upside down. We interviewed valets, the senior staff members. And when I called the Pentagon to tell them this had in fact happened, it had never happened before. So the Pentagon had no process. They had no means by which they could actually recreate the codes,
Oh, wow.
in a very critical, timely manner. And I think that shows, again, President Clinton was more concerned, and he swore, basically swore me to an oath of non-disclosure, and I didn't talk about it until I retired and wrote the book. But at the time, he was more concerned about the fact that this story did not leak out to the press. This was 1998. He was going through Monica Lewinsky's situation and an impending impeachment, which he, of course, was impeached. So he was more concerned about the PR impact than he was about the national security impact. And I think that speaks volumes.
I think it does, too. I mean, no doubt this impeachment thing was a tremendous distraction, and for anybody it would be. But again, priorities, unbelievable. And so they never were found? They never found these codes?
No, we never did find them. And we actually, the Pentagon jumped quickly to the mission and actually recreated and into the codes very, very quickly, obviously.
Yeah.
And we continue to search the White House, and to this day,
wow.
To the best of my knowledge. I mean, I left in 1998, in April of 1998. We never did find them, and I'm sure that, I joke that we did check on eBay, and we did check on eBay.
I was going to say that I would be the eBay watch from now on, that I would...